Hello there, and a very warm welcome to you. It's so good to have you with us today.
It really is. You know, Daniel, as we journey through life, especially as we move past 60 and into these really quite remarkable years, our friendships can be some of our greatest treasures, can't they?
They absolutely can, Serena. They're often the folks who've seen us through thick and thin, shared countless laughs, maybe a few tears along the way, and understand our stories like no one else. These connections can be a real source of joy and comfort.
Definitely. But Daniel, have you ever found yourself, or have our viewers ever found, perhaps after a phone call with a friend, or maybe after a coffee get-together, feeling, well, more tired than when you started? Almost like your energy has just sort of seeped away?
That's a very relatable experience, Serena. Or maybe you even feel a little bit down, a little bit heavy, after an interaction that you hoped would be uplifting. It's a funny thing, isn't it? You look forward to connecting, but afterwards, you just feel drained.
It is a tricky thing to talk about, I know. Friendships are so precious, and we often hold on to them very dearly, especially the ones that have a long history.
Precisely. But the truth is, sometimes certain relationships, even those long-standing ones, can start to weigh us down. They can begin to feel less like a source of support and more like a source of stress or exhaustion. This can be particularly true as our own needs, our own energy levels, and perhaps even our perspectives on life begin to shift in our 60s and beyond.
That makes a lot of sense. Our priorities can change, and what we need from our connections might change too.
Exactly. And protecting our peace, our emotional well-being, and our physical health in these precious years becomes absolutely paramount. It's not about being selfish or unkind or disloyal to old friends. Not at all. It's about recognizing when a dynamic, the way a friendship works, isn't really serving your well-being anymore.
Our time and our energy are such valuable commodities, aren't they? They feel more precious now than ever before.
They certainly do. And we really do need to be mindful and intentional about how we spend them. And just as importantly, with whom we spend them. So today, Serena, I thought we could talk heart to heart about this very subject.
That sounds like a very important conversation to have, Daniel.
I believe it is. We're going to explore why some friendships can feel so draining, particularly after 60, and we'll look at 4 clear signs, 4 specific indicators that might suggest a friendship is costing you more in energy and peace than it's giving back. And importantly, we'll touch on why recognizing these signs is so vital for your overall health and happiness.
And I imagine this isn't about pointing fingers or making anyone feel bad.
Goodness, no. Not at all. It's about empowering you, empowering us to make conscious choices that support our health, our serenity, and our joy in this chapter of life. It's about self-care, really, in one of its most important forms.
It's a sensitive topic, I completely understand. Friendships are woven into the fabric of our lives.
They are indeed. But because it's so important for our well-being, it's worth exploring with honesty and gentleness. So, let's gently unpack the first sign that a friendship might be taking a significant toll on your well-being, particularly now, in this chapter of our lives. The first sign I want to talk about is what I call the constant negativity drain.
The constant negativity drain. I think I can almost picture what that means. Is that when conversations always seem to focus on the bad stuff?
Precisely, Serena. Have you ever had a friend where almost every time you talk or meet, the conversation is dominated by complaints, by what's wrong with the world, by their grievances, or perhaps by gossip and criticism of others? You might listen patiently, offer a sympathetic ear, but you leave the interaction feeling heavy, maybe a bit pessimistic yourself, or even a little anxious. It's as if a dark cloud has sort of settled over you.
Oh, that's a powerful image, and I can see how that would be draining. You try to be a good friend, but it's hard when it's always gloomy.
It is. Think about it for a moment. Perhaps there's a friend. Let's call her Susan, or him, David. You might look forward to your regular chat, hoping for a bit of connection and lightheartedness. But more often than not, the conversation quickly turns into a long list of everything that's wrong, their aches and pains, which of course we all experience and need to share sometimes, but this is constant. Their dissatisfaction with their family, the annoying neighbors, the state of politics, the rudeness of shop assistants. It just goes on and on.
And you might try to steer it to something positive, share some good news.
Exactly. You might try to gently steer the conversation towards something more positive. Maybe share a lovely thing that happened to you, or talk about a new hobby you're enjoying. But somehow, the conversation always veers back to the negative, back to their problems. It's like trying to fill a leaky bucket. You pour in your positive energy, your suggestions, your optimism, but it just drains away, and they remain focused on the gloom.
After those encounters, how do people typically feel? I imagine not very uplifted.
That's right. Do you feel uplifted, inspired, or do you feel a bit like an emotional sponge that's just absorbed a whole lot of negativity? You might even find yourself feeling a bit guilty for having good news or for feeling generally content because it seems out of place in the face of their persistent unhappiness.
So this isn't just about a friend having a bad day or going through a tough patch. Because we all need support then.
That's a very important distinction, Serena. We all have those times, and that's when friends support each other. This is about a consistent, pervasive pattern of negativity that becomes the main theme of your interactions. Over time, you might even start to dread seeing their name pop up on your phone, or feel a sense of preemptive weariness before a planned get-together because you know what's coming.
And that constant exposure must have an effect on us too, beyond just feeling glum afterwards.
It really can. Consistently being exposed to high levels of negativity can actually have a real impact on our own mental and even physical health. It can increase our stress levels, which we know isn't good for our hearts or our immune systems. It can affect our sleep. It can cloud our own outlook on life, making it harder for us to see the good and enjoy the blessings we have. We work so hard, especially at this stage of life, to cultivate peace, to stay healthy, to find joy in our days, and it's so important to protect that precious inner environment.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, if that exchange is truly a friendship that nourishes both people, or if you've unintentionally slipped into the role of an unpaid therapist or, as some people say, an emotional dumping ground.
That's exactly the question to ponder. Real, healthy friendship should generally be a two-way street, a source of mutual comfort and uplift, not a constant drain on your spirit that leaves you feeling depleted and disheartened. It's something to really consider if this sounds familiar to you. Now, closely related to that feeling of being weighed down by relentless negativity is another important sign to be aware of.
What's that, Daniel?
This one is about the balance in the friendship itself, or more accurately, the lack of it. It's when you start to realize, perhaps with a growing sense of unease or sadness, that the give and take in the relationship just isn't there anymore. Or maybe, if you're truly honest with yourself, it was never really there to begin with, but it's become much more apparent and much more draining now that your own energy and time feel more finite. This is the sign of the one-sided street.
A one-sided street, where you feel like you're doing all the work to keep the friendship going?
Precisely. Think about your interactions. Are you usually the one who initiates contact? Are you the one who always calls or texts or suggests getting together? Do you find yourself being the primary keeper of the connection, remembering birthdays, anniversaries, asking about their family, checking in if they've been unwell?
And then you might notice what's coming back in return.
Exactly. What happens in return? Do they reciprocate that effort? Do they call you just to see how you are doing? Do they initiate plans with the same regularity? Or do conversations tend to revolve mostly around their life, their news, their problems, with very little space or genuine curiosity about what's happening with you?
I can see how that would feel very imbalanced. You might have a friend, let's use your example, Robert or Linda. You're always the one making the effort, listening, supporting.
Yes, you might always be the one to pick up the phone. You suggest meeting for lunch, and you might even be the one who drives to pick them up. You listen intently to all their stories, their worries, their triumphs. You offer support. You celebrate their successes. You comfort them in their sorrows. But then you pause and think, when was the last time Robert or Linda called you just for a chat? To ask how your new gardening project is going, or how you're feeling after that doctor's appointment you mentioned?
Or when did they last make an effort to plan something that you would particularly enjoy? And when you do share, do you feel they're truly listening?
Those are key questions, Serena. Or are they just waiting for a gap so they can turn the conversation back to themselves? This kind of imbalance, where you're consistently the giver and they are consistently the taker, can be incredibly exhausting over time. It can leave you feeling unseen, unheard, and frankly, a bit like a convenience rather than a cherished friend.
And it's not about keeping score, is it? Friendships naturally have ebbs and flows.
Not at all. Friendships aren't transactions. They naturally have periods where one person might need more support than the other. That's perfectly normal. But when it becomes a fixed, long-term pattern where you're constantly pouring your energy, your time, and your care into the friendship with very little coming back your way, it's a clear sign that something is off.
It's a sign that the friendship may have become a one-way street, and you're the one doing all the driving, navigating, and refueling, as you said. That sounds like a very lonely and depleting road.
It can be, especially when we're aiming to conserve our energy for relationships and activities that truly nourish our souls and support our well-being in these important years. It can make you start to question your own value in that relationship, and that's a heavy burden to carry, one that can subtly erode your own sense of self-worth if you're not careful.
That feeling of putting so much in and getting so little back, that one-sided street we just talked about, it truly can wear you down over the years, can't it? It makes you feel a bit like a well that's constantly being drawn from, without ever being replenished.
An excellent analogy, Serena. And while some friendships might drain you because of that kind of imbalance, others can feel depleting for a different, perhaps more subtle, reason. This brings me to our third sign, which is when you find yourself in a friendship that feels like it's stuck in the past, with no room for growth or change.
Stuck in the past? How do you mean, Daniel?
Well, life after 60 can be a wonderfully dynamic time. Many of us are retiring from long careers, which opens up space for new interests, new hobbies, perhaps even new ways of looking at the world. We might be learning new things, traveling more, volunteering, or simply evolving in our perspectives and priorities. We're not the same people we were at 20 or 30 or even 50. And that's a good thing. That's growth.
It certainly is. It's exciting to keep learning and evolving.
But sometimes, Serena, we have friends who seem determined to keep us, and the friendship itself, firmly anchored in a bygone era. Have you ever been with a friend where the conversation almost exclusively revolves around the good old days?
Oh, I think we all know someone like that. Reminiscing can be lovely, sharing old memories.
It can be, absolutely. It's part of the richness of long-term friendships. But what happens when that's all there is? What if, when you try to talk about a new online course you're excited about, or a recent insight you've had, or a new passion you're developing, they seem disinterested, or they quickly steer the conversation back to familiar, well-trodden territory?
Or they might even subtly dismiss your new interests. Perhaps with a comment like, "Oh, you're always trying something new," or "I remember when you used to be more like this."
Exactly. It can feel as though they have a fixed idea of who you are, based on who you were, and they're not really open to, or perhaps even comfortable with, the person you are becoming, or have become. This kind of dynamic can be surprisingly draining.
It sounds like you're being held in a time warp. You're trying to move forward, but the friendship keeps pulling you back.
Precisely. It can make you feel unseen, or at least not seen for who you truly are now. You might feel a sense of stagnation when you're with them, a feeling that you have to shrink yourself down or put on an old mask to fit into their expectations of the friendship. And that's tiring. It takes energy to pretend or to constantly navigate their resistance to your growth.
So, healthy friendships, especially now, should be ones that acknowledge and support our evolution.
Ideally, yes. They should be places where we can share our current excitements and challenges, where our friends are curious about our new chapters, just as we are about theirs. If a friendship consistently leaves you feeling like you have to check your current self at the door, or that your personal growth is an inconvenience to the established dynamic, it might be a sign that the friendship, as it currently exists, is no longer a good fit for the person you are today.
It doesn't mean the past wasn't valuable, but it does mean questioning whether the present form of the friendship truly energizes and supports your continued journey.
Well said, Serena. We deserve to be around people who celebrate our growth, not those who consciously or unconsciously try to keep us tethered to who we used to be. Now, moving on from friendships that might feel stuck, there's another kind of interaction that can be deeply unsettling and very, very draining. This is our fourth sign, and it's when a friendship consistently leaves you feeling judged, criticized, or somehow inadequate.
Oh, that sounds particularly painful, especially if it's subtle.
It can be. This one can be particularly insidious because sometimes the criticism is veiled, or it comes from someone you've known for a very long time, so you might brush it off or try to tell yourself they don't really mean it that way. But the feeling it leaves behind is unmistakable. Think about a friend. Let's call her Margaret, or him, Arthur. You might share some good news. Perhaps you've taken up a new fitness class and you're feeling proud of yourself, or you've redecorated a room in your home and you're pleased with how it turned out.
And instead of genuine enthusiasm, their response might be a bit off?
Exactly. It might be a backhanded compliment like, "Oh, that's nice for you, dear, though I don't think I'd have the patience for that at our age," or, "Well, the color is bold. Are you sure about that?" Or perhaps they offer unsolicited advice that feels more like a critique of your choices, your lifestyle, your opinions, or even your appearance.
Comments like, "You really should try to get out more," implying you're a recluse. Or, "Don't you think that dress is a bit young for you?" Those can really chip away at your confidence.
They can. After you spend time with someone like this, how do you feel? Do you feel good about yourself? Confident? Uplifted? Or do you find yourself replaying their comments in your head, feeling a bit defensive or questioning your own judgment?
I imagine you might feel like you have to be careful about what you say or do around them for fear of their disapproval. or you feel a need to justify your choices. That sounds utterly exhausting.
It is. True friendship should be a safe harbor, a place where you feel accepted for who you are, quirks, and all. It should be a space where you can be vulnerable without fear of judgment, and where you receive support and encouragement, not constant scrutiny or subtle put-downs.
Of course, honest friends might occasionally offer a different perspective, and that can be valuable if it comes from a place of genuine care.
That's true, Serena. But there's a world of difference between that rare, gentle offering and a persistent pattern of criticism or judgment that makes you feel diminished. Especially now, in our 60s and beyond, we've earned the right to feel comfortable and confident in our own skin, to make our own choices without having to defend them to someone who seems to always find fault.
These are the years to embrace self-acceptance, not to be around people who make us doubt ourselves.
Absolutely. A friendship that consistently makes you feel judged is not a healthy friendship. It's an emotional drain that can seriously impact your self-esteem and your overall happiness. Recognizing this pattern is so crucial, because these subtle or not so subtle digs can be incredibly damaging to our spirit over time. We need to be cultivating relationships that build us up, not ones that subtly tear us down, comment by comment.
Indeed, Daniel. Being around someone who constantly chips away at your self-worth, who makes you feel judged rather than cherished, is an incredibly heavy load to bear. It really does run counter to everything we're trying to cultivate in this precious stage of life.
It does. And when you put all these signs together, the constant negativity, that feeling of being on a one-sided street, being stuck in a past that no longer fits, or consistently feeling criticized, it becomes clear that some friendships, however long their history, can genuinely start to undermine our health and our happiness.
It's not a pleasant realization, and it's certainly not an easy one to face. But acknowledging it is so incredibly important for our overall well-being.
You see, the energy these kinds of draining friendships require from us is significant. It's emotional energy, it's mental energy, and sometimes it even feels like physical energy is zapped away. And that's energy we could be using for things that truly nourish us. Perhaps learning that new skill you've always dreamed of, spending quality time with family who uplift you, engaging in hobbies that bring you joy, or even just having quiet, restorative moments for yourself.
Our reserves as we get older, while still plentiful for the good things, are not infinite. We need to be wise stewards of our energy.
Precisely. Investing it where it will yield peace, happiness, and connection, not depletion and distress. And it's important to remember, if feelings of stress, anxiety, or sadness related to these or any other issues become overwhelming, it's always a good idea to have a chat with your doctor or a qualified mental health professional. They can offer support and guidance tailored to your specific situation.
That's a very important reminder, Daniel. Now I know what some of our viewers might be thinking. But this is a friend I've known for 30 years, 40 years, even longer. How can I possibly just let go? That is such a valid and understandable feeling.
It absolutely is. The thought of creating distance or even ending a long-standing friendship can feel daunting, even painful. There can be feelings of guilt, of loyalty, of wondering if you're doing the right thing. These relationships are part of our history, part of our story.
So what's a gentle thought to consider in those situations?
Here's a gentle thought. People change, circumstances change, and what once nourished you might, for various reasons, no longer do so. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for yourself, and perhaps even, in the long run, for the dynamic of the friendship, is to acknowledge that it's no longer serving your well-being in a positive way.
And letting go doesn't always mean a dramatic confrontation, does it?
Not at all. It doesn't have to be about burning bridges in anger or resentment. Often, it's a more subtle process. It might mean gradually creating a little more space. Perhaps you don't pick up the phone quite as often, or you shorten the duration of your visits. Maybe you become a little less available for those interactions that you know will leave you feeling drained.
So it's more about setting loving boundaries, first and foremost for yourself.
Exactly. You might consciously choose to steer conversations towards lighter topics, and if they veer into that familiar negative or critical territory, you might gently disengage or change the subject more assertively than you used to. It's about recognizing that your peace of mind and your emotional health are just as important as anyone else's. It's an act of profound self-respect and self-care.
That approach sounds much more manageable and less confrontational. It's empowering to know there are gentle ways to protect our energy.
It is. So, as we've talked today, we've touched on some really key indicators, haven't we, Serena?
We certainly have. That pervasive cloud of constant negativity. That feeling of being on a one-sided street. Those friendships stuck in the past. And those connections where you consistently end up feeling judged or criticized.
Recognizing these patterns is the first, most crucial step. It's about tuning into how you truly feel after interacting with certain people. Your body and your emotions often tell you the truth, even when your mind tries to make excuses or rationalize. If you consistently feel worse, more tired, more anxious, or smaller after spending time with someone, that's a significant message, and it's one worth listening to.
And remembering that making choices that protect your energy and your well-being isn't selfish. It's essential, especially now.
Absolutely. These are your golden years, meant for peace, for joy, for connection that uplifts and inspires. You deserve friendships that are sources of mutual support, laughter, and genuine care. You deserve to be around people who see you, who appreciate you for who you are today, and who add to your life rather than subtract from it.
Sometimes creating a little space from draining relationships allows new, more positive connections to blossom, or gives you more energy for the relationships that truly do make your heart sing.
That's a wonderful point, Serena. Small changes in how you manage these dynamics can lead to a big difference in how you feel every single day. More energetic, more optimistic, and more at peace. I truly hope this conversation has given everyone some food for thought, and perhaps a little bit of courage if you've been feeling this way about any of your own relationships.
It's a tender subject, and it takes courage to even consider these things. Daniel, I'm sure our viewers will have their own experiences and insights.
I'm sure they will. And I'd love to hear your thoughts if you feel comfortable sharing. Have you ever experienced a friendship that felt draining in these ways? And how did you navigate it? Your experiences and insights could be so helpful to others in our community here. So please, do leave a comment below. We can all learn from each other.
And if you found this video helpful, or if it resonated with you, please do give it a thumbs up. That little like button really helps others to find this content.
It does indeed. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to the channel. We post new videos regularly on topics that we hope are helpful and encouraging for living our best lives after 60.
Thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
Yes, thank you. Remember, you are worthy of relationships that honor you, support you, and bring you joy. Prioritizing your health and your happiness is not just okay, it's vital. Here's to cultivating peace, protecting our energy, and enjoying every precious moment. Take good care, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.
Bye for now.